So one of the problems with this reading, the Euthyphro Problem, is that it's a small bit right in the middle of a dialogue by Plato. And that dialogue is between Socrates and Euthyphro. And what they've arrived at is a notorious part of the dialogue. Where basically Socrates has done his Socrates thing, which is ask what is. He wants to know what something is. And in this case, it's piety. And he's, as usual, saying, I don't know what it is. You tell me, please. And Euthyphro, his conversational partner, comes up with a definition of piety, which is essentially what the gods love. That's where we are. And that is not, one of the questions I'm asking you is whether you have any previous associations with the word piety. The pious, being pious, piety, it is a religious virtue. And someone who pays close attention to their religion and tries to live by its principles and cares about what God or the gods think of them is usually thought of as pious. And like most people who are religious, they're not terribly philosophically minded like Euthyphro and haven't been faced with this question, what is piety? And, Euthyphro does a pretty good job. The pious, doing what's pious, is doing what the gods love, which is really not that bad, I think. Having read the dialogue over a number of years, I don't think it's really such a bad definition, but Socrates really takes it apart and really the key to this reading is unpacking Socrates' distinction here, beginning on the first page when he says, is the pious loved by the gods because it is pious, or is it pious because it is loved by the gods? A lot of people, frankly, make fun of this part of the dialogue. There's nothing, and humor is great, and making fun of things is great, but there's really nothing funny about it or sort of ridiculous about it. He's pointing out something, um, about generally about logic. Um, and his example is something, calling something being carried. If we say that something is being carried, it's being carried because somebody's carrying it. If somebody weren't carrying it, it wouldn't be being carried. Um, and what that means is that some things we say, some predicates or descriptions of things, um, are true of things because other people are doing something. Right? Contrast that with something like being square or being curved, let's say, a figure. If we look at a triangle or a square or a circle, we could say that it's one of the intrinsic features of a square is that it's rectilinear. One of the intrinsic features of a circle is that it's curved. It's different from being carried because being carried, let's say that's true of a football at a particular time. That is, that particular time being when the player is actually carrying it. It's true of the football that it's being carried, but we wouldn't say it's an intrinsic feature of the football that it's being carried. No, it happens to be true of it at that particular time because someone's carrying it. Contrast that with something being a square or something being curved, let's say being rectilinear rather than being a square or rectangle being rectilinear. That's not something like being carried. It's more like an independent intrinsic feature that the thing has. So, what is Socrates' point in applying this distinction to piety? What he wants to know, as he says, is the pious loved by the gods because it is pious, or is it pious because it's loved by the gods? That is, we think of an action. Let's just say that we say that is a pious action, what you did. Is it pious because the gods love it? If that's the case, and it very well may be the case, then what makes it pious is the gods loving it. So if the gods didn't love it, it wouldn't be pious. That very well may be the nature of piety. Something is pious if the gods love it. But then we could ask, why do the gods love it? And that's where things get a little tricky, right? If we say it's the very act of being approved by the gods or approved by God or loved by God that makes it pious, then that question is maybe the wrong question. Um, really, what Socrates is getting at. And that very well may be, right? Morally speaking, a good action, if you believe in what will come to be known as divine command theory, then a good action is good because it's approved by God. And that's the only answer. But Socrates doesn't like that answer, right? In what follows, he's basically arguing that uh, something is pious not because it's loved by the gods, but it's loved by the gods because it is pious. So, what is pious and what is God beloved, he says, are two different things. Because the gods may love anything. We don't know how they think. So, whatever they love is God beloved. But that's just different from calling something good. And that's essentially what I think Socrates is getting at, is that what is pious is what is good, and the gods love it, but they love it because it's pious and good, if you see the distinction. This has big consequences for the nature of morality. And it is that question there. Is a good action good because it is approved by God? Or is it just good? You can see the stakes couldn't be higher in a way. I mean, it may not be that this is the best or the clearest introduction to the question, but it is a very important question in morality, and especially in the relationship between morality and religion. I think that there's a certain point of view that says that the only thing that can make an action morally good is it's being approved by or demanded by or commanded by God. Others will say that no, there may be a God and he may approve certain actions, but he doesn't. It's not his approval that makes them good. They are intrinsically either good or bad, and presumably God, being reasonable, approves the good ones and disapproves of the bad ones. But God's approval and disapproval is not what makes them good or bad. This is really the issue of this section of the course on the relationship between morality and religion. And again, I think that it goes very deep, because one could say that, well, an action is good because it's approved by God and there's nothing else to say. Or one could say that no, God probably approves, we would think, good actions and disapproves bad ones, but because they're good or bad. But then, of course, we have to supply the criterion for our distinction between good and bad, because it wouldn't be the attitude of God towards the action. It would have to be something else, and that's, you know, What moral theory tries to do is to provide some sort of criterion, rational criterion, for the distinction between good and bad.